Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I want to begin by trying to knit together a few stories, and I've got a slightly cheeky conclusion to draw from them. It's the collapse in the number of applications to the nursing industry from European Union countries, matched actually today, very grim news today from nursing and midwifery professions, that there's been a 1/3 drop in domestic applications to study for these vocations at universities as well. So all those people we're going to train up to do the jobs currently being done by people from overseas, no one is, or there's a massive drop-off in the applications. Farmers are warning that crops could go unpicked. They have a serious crisis looming as summer approaches. The hospitality industry is already in some quarters gone into free fall, and the city, of course, are about to decamp to Dublin and Frankfurt on an epic scale. Uncontrolled mass emigration is going to bring this country to its knees. It's so weird, isn't it, the world we're living in at the moment, where the immigration stories of the last few years, which have been largely exaggerated or completely invented, are being replaced by stories that are completely and demonstrably true. People are leaving on an epic scale. Eastern Europeans applying to come here to work, the number of national insurance numbers registered has fallen sharply in the last year. Poles, citizens of 7 other states, have dipped to the lowest level since they joined the EU in 2004, at which point, forgive me, but dozy people will start cheering and saying this is great. And then perhaps a year down the line, when the local public services actually can't fill vacancies, or when a local business closes, or when the economy begins to suffer from the disappearance of all these taxpayers, maybe at some point people will wake up and realise that this is not good news. Nurses, come on. In fact, the more you think about it, the more that rhetoric of training up our own is disgusting, isn't it? Training up our own. What does that say? You go to a hospital, right, to have your bunions lanced, or to have your hemorrhoids removed, or to have, heart surgery. And there are nurses and doctors there who have moved here from European Union countries. And you're essentially contributing now, we all are, to a national narrative that says, we don't want you here, we want to replace you with somebody else who is of a slightly different geographical background. That's the thing, isn't it? This is the thing that I feel increasingly powerless to resist. It's the idea that, to me, is pretty close to sacred. It's the closest thing I have, actually, to a sort of article of political faith, is that you judge people by what they do, not by what they are. So if, for example, you drive a van into a crowd of innocent people, I don't care whether you're an Islamist terrorist or a white supremacist terrorist. You are equal in your disgracefulness, your disgustingness. You're absolutely equal. There is no distinction for me to be drawn. If you shoot an MP or you blow yourself up in a crowded concert hall, you are equally disgusting. I mean, one crime is worse than the other because it has more victims, but the motivation of the culprit is, for me, not determined. It's irrelevant. It's the crime that people are judged by. You judge people by their actions. But there seems to be a desperate move at the moment towards the opposite of that. Don't judge people by their actions. Judge them increasingly by those attributes over which they have no control, like the religion that their parents belonged to when they were born, or the country that they happen to be living in. The idea that person is worth more or less than that person based on utterly arbitrary and accidental criteria. Is Boris Johnson less British than me because he has a Turkish great-grandfather, and was born in America? Or is his Britishness or his usefulness to politics determined by how he acts? Am I supposed to look at somebody like Mo Farah and feel less pride in Mo Farah's Olympic gold medals than I did in Sebastian Coe's? I can't. I'm really sorry. He's wearing my flag. He's running races and winning. I feel exactly the same about him as I do about Sebastian Coe. And do I care if a nurse provides me with brilliant treatment? Do I feel somehow less lucky if she has a Polish accent than I would if she had a Devonian accent? Do I feel less lucky to have a doctor with brown skin than a doctor with white skin? And this is where we're going now. And this is quite deliberately where we're being led. In America and in Britain, the idea now is that you judge somebody first and foremost by what they are, not what they've done. And I think this is a kind of culmination, obviously, of a number of moves, some of them unwitting, some of them quite deliberate. But we've now created an environment precisely because of this, and in a large part, I think unintentionally. We say we can replace these people when we leave the European Union, we'll get rid of all these foreigners and replace them with our own at a time of relatively low, incredibly low unemployment, and at a time when in nursing and midwifery the applications have gone off a cliff. They've gone off a cliff. And farmers are complaining. The hospitality industry was the first, wasn't it? You remember the lady with 2 hotels in Devon rang us up about 6 months ago and said she just can't get bodies. People are going. People are leaving. They don't want to be here because we've created such an unpleasant atmosphere. The best solution to people troubled by immigration, I suppose, is to create a country that is not an attractive place to travel to. I don't know if it's too late to put the brakes on this or to turn it around, but I'll tell you, we are going to feel the impact of uncontrolled mass emigration for decades to come. Farmers warning that crops are going to go unpicked. Recruitment consultants warning that they're struggling to fill vacancies. The city poised to see a massive transplantation of money and bodies to continental Europe and to the Republic of Ireland, actually. A lot of places opening up there because it provides a gateway to the European Union that London will no longer be able to do. What other industries can we put on this list? There's massive shortages in the construction industry. The one thing that we've been told for years is being absolutely crippled by immigration. You can't find skilled construction workers. The money that you can make now, it's not quite Auf Wiedersehen pet levels, but if the building continues in the richer parts of town, and I think we'll do stories today. In some ways, I've got 2 questions where I don't want the phones to ring. I don't want anybody to be in a situation. Phil just made me laugh. You should see my Dr. James. She's Egyptian and gorgeous. I can't wait to be ill again. There you go. Find a little bit of levity wherever you may go. First of all, if you're planning to go to this day of rage and have a bit of a protest, I'd quite like you to phone me because I haven't really been able to find anybody that's going. I found an awful lot of rage, but it's all in the Daily Mail and in the right-wing media. An awful lot of rage about rage. Oh, there's going to be some rage. That's made me absolutely raging. But I can't find anyone that's actually going. So if you are, give us a buzz. But the other question is, really, are you going to go? Are you and your family going to quit Britain? And is there anything I can do to make you stay? 0345 6060973. Not me personally. Well, maybe there is. Unlikely, though. Even my ego doesn't extend to that level of self-congratulation. But yeah, give me a shout out on the radio. Say happy birthday to my Uncle Radek, and then we'll stay. We'll stay for another 5 years, James. So are you actually thinking of going? You come from a European Union country, and you have felt welcome right up until the point of that referendum result, and for a period afterwards as well, because everyone was insisting it had nothing to do with you and nothing to do with immigration and everything to do with sovereignty and all that sort of thing, and fish, passports. But actually the atmosphere now has become such, or the sentiment has become such that you are changing your plans. I just want you to give me a call and talk me through it. And if you're an employer, actually comfort the rest of us. Tell us that these statistics might be evidentially true, but they mask a broader truth, and the broader truth is that there is nowhere near the scale of the problem looming that some people fear. So that's what I want to hear from you. 0345 6060973. Polish, Latvian, Lithuanian, wherever, Bulgarian, Slovakian, but also, of course, Italian, French, German, Spanish. Wherever you come from originally, you've made a home here, you've made a career here, you've made a life here, and you're thinking of going. Or you are going, or you have gone, but you're, I don't know, listening to me on the internet. Give us a call. And do I want the phones to ring or not? I think it's, well, I know it's true because the numbers are here. They're countable. I wish it wasn't true. If you want to try and put a rosy gloss on this, if you want to try and explain why it's not actually a bad thing, you'll be welcome as well. Remember, this programme, peace and love all the way. 0345 6060973. And there are other reasons why Brexit might have prompted you to quit these shores. You could be really struggling with the absence of wage growth and the increasing inflation, the almost criminal inability to get on the property ladder if you earn anything less than a comfortable 6-figure salary in the southeast, the fact that your colleagues now, or possibly some of your neighbours, have felt emboldened to say things to you and about you that they wouldn't have done previously. You've seen a massive spike in those sort of incidents, those sort of crimes. Again, I don't care what your racist abuse is about, whether you're abusing a white person or a brown person or a black person or a Polish person or an Irish person or an English person or a Welshman. It's an offence. It's bad behaviour. But we seem to be increasingly moving towards a place where its badness is defined not by the action, not by what you've done, but by what you are. You see it in America on an incredible level. In America at the moment, the phone lines are open. We'll start after the travel news. I've got 2 phone lines free, so grab one now. What are your plans? Are we looking at an era, an age of utterly unprecedented and uncontrolled mass emigration, mass exodus, departures? Give us a call now and tell me. Because in America, I haven't really been following it. There's an attempted or a shooting of a congressman who thankfully survived, undertaken by a man with a history of violence and trouble, but also a history of supporting the Democrat Party. And I hadn't realised just how mad things have gone. Donald Trump stood up during his election campaign and said to gun control advocates, I beg your pardon, gun control enemies, said to, the Right to Bear Arms Brigade, the Second Amendment people, as he called them, said if Hillary Clinton gets elected, she's going to take away your guns and there'll be nothing you can do about it. Oh, well, maybe you Second Amendment people would be able to do something about it. And that is a suggestion to people who believe passionately in the right to bear arms that they might go out and assassinate her. It just is, right? No one with a brain is going to disagree about that. But now his supporters are somehow arguing that a play in America in which Julius Caesar looks like Donald Trump is some appalling affront upon the sanctity of public life in America. So the president can stand up and implicitly suggest that his supporters might want to shoot the woman that he's running against. But a play is responsible for a man deciding to shoot a Republican congressman. And that's how mad things have gone over there. I'm really hoping they're not going to go that mad over here. And the best way to ensure that they don't is to remember that the bozos who drove their van over Westminster Bridge and the bozo reported to have driven his van into a crowd of people outside a mosque in Finsbury Park, they're on the same team. And the rest of us are not. We're actually knitting together quite a lot of stuff here. But the bottom line is, either you are in favour of innocent people being punished for the crimes of guilty people, whether it is utterly blameless Muslims being blamed and punished for the actions of terrorists, or you're not. I'm not, and you're not. But a surprising number of people are. You've got to punish them. We've got to do something about this. And that's the atmosphere that also plays into, I don't really want to live here anymore, position. So whatever your reason is, give me a call. If it's linked to atmosphere, I'm really interested in hearing from you, and I'm really interested in hearing from everybody about whether or not there's anything we can do to fix this now. Lots of rage about the Day of Rage at the moment. No people planning to attend the Day of Rage, although phone lines are quite busy. I can, yes, see the callers on the screen, so I will go to them immediately. I can't, however, see what they're going to say. We're in a slightly different studio from usual today, so this will be fun. This is an exercise in suck it and see. The conversation is built around the numbers of people leaving this country, and the numbers of applications to work here, and of course pay tax plummeting from European Union countries before we've even left. Cities, the city, the NHS, the hospitality industry, farmers, all warning of an employment crisis. Economic growth is contingent upon. It doesn't actually stand up to full scrutiny forever, because you can't have infinite growth on a planet with finite resources. But we are where we are. And Gaz is in Spain. Gaz, what would you like to say?
Hello there, James. First time caller,
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Well, look, the story, I mean, I grew up, I came to the UK in the late 70s. I remember what London was like in the 80s. I went to school there, and under the Conservatives, London, the UK was really rubbish, and we've gone back to the Conservatives again, and they are rubbish. They just talk nonsense. You get this Duncan Smith guy.
Well, yeah, I've been. But wind your neck in a moment, guys. We've got plenty of time in the coming months to discuss the political leadership of the country. But that's not what I'm discussing today. What I'm discussing today is whether or not Britain, and I mean, it's not going to have changed.
I'm coming to it.
Get your skates on.
Right. Well, listen, I mean, people talk going about like in 5 and 10 years' time, Britain would be doing better. They're confident. I mean, what is? I'm confident I'll be a billionaire in 10 years' time. I can't go to the bank manager and tell him this, and he'll lend me the money that I want. You know, they're just talking nonsense. The UK needs people, and everything now in terms of manufacturing everything is a process. Once the process is set up, everything will work smoothly. To actually cut off from Europe and go elsewhere and get our bits and pieces from elsewhere or supply our bits and pieces elsewhere, it takes years.
Well, I'm more interested in atmosphere today. I mean, we've done a lot on economics, and you're quite right. All the people still waiting for their magic unicorn to be delivered are still waiting for their magic unicorn to be delivered, but astonishingly still convinced it's going to arrive. Why are you in Spain? Do you live there, or are you just on your hollybobs?
No, I've eloped actually. I've run away. I couldn't stand the UK. So like the atmosphere in the UK, the atmosphere in London is really rubbish. I mean, as I say, I went back.
I'm going to just pick you up on that. I live in London. I grant you, I'm not. I'm not of a Syrian. You said, I think originally.
Yes.
So I'm not foreign. I don't look. I'm not from an ethnic minority or anything like that. But I'm on the radio every day. I speak to a hell of a lot of people. I know that the haters have been weaponised. But I feel London is an exception to that process. Normally, it's the people who've got very, very little experience of diversity and multiculturalism who are convinced by the Daily Mail that it's a disgusting failure. You felt London was unwelcoming after being here for 30 or 40 years, really?
40 years in London, and I felt unwelcome after the Brexit vote. The look, you see, I have a sort of a Middle Eastern look, so
yes.
You probably will never feel that. And I felt the looks that I was getting in 2016, latter part of 2016, very similar to the looks I was getting at school in the 80s. Mm. And in the 80s, the school I went to, kids used to carry knives, golf clubs. That's the sort of time. I mean,
Didn't used to carry golf clubs. What, you'd turn up for their geography lesson with a golf club hanging out their back pocket?
I kid you not, they used to bring golf clubs to the school. There was a period I carried a knife. I was under 16. I carried a knife. I had no idea what to do with it, frankly speaking.
Okay, guys, I'm going to crack on. Enjoy your life in Spain. I wish you well, and look out for those golf clubs. There's 25 minutes, a lot of golf in Spain. You could have jumped out of the frying pan into the fire. And I'm not making light of what he said. He's absolutely right. I don't look Middle Eastern, so I'm not going to pick up. I see it on social media, epic levels now of unadorned racism, unapologetic racism. We got rid of that pesky political correctness, and we've got our country back. You can go around being racist again. It's great. Everyone's a winner, except everyone. But I don't necessarily want to get bogged down in this conservative line of argument. I'm interested in your life, and one of the reasons I'm interested in it is because of a post that we read out yesterday on the programme that had been sent to me by Jacob Krupa, who is a Polish journalist working in Britain for the Polish press agency, doing some incredible work. And I read it to you. It got an amazing response, well over 1,000 retweets as well when it went on Twitter from Jacob's account. And in it, after 14 happy years in the UK, the correspondent described why the rest of his family have left. Well, that correspondent has got in touch, and we've got in touch with him, Radek, in Hinckley. It's a terrible story that you tell, Radek, but I'm interested in the question of atmosphere rather than necessarily security. Let me explain. I understand that not knowing whether your rights and residence is going to be ring-fenced, is going to be protected, must be incredibly discombobulating and is part of the reason why your wife and children have gone back to Poland. But the atmosphere in which you live, in Hinckley, has that changed at all?
Oh, hi, James. Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that very powerful post that you put on social media as well.
It is a powerful post, and just to show how the basic things like relocation of people who've been here for 14 years is moving masses of people. Yeah. As you said, I've got a couple of thousand likes on my other Facebook page of this post, and a lot of comments relating to my situation, and people expressing exactly the same situation with their lives. But answering to your questions about the situation in Hinckley, what I must stress is that it's not about Brexit as such.
No.
Because Brexit is a democratic decision, and I understand it because I'm a British citizen, and I voted, obviously against Brexit, but I can accept that more than 50% of the population voted,
more than 50% of the vote of the people who voted. But yes, of course, the numbers are I mean, they're just
the
there.
numbers
They're
are there,
undeniable.
exactly. I think the main issue with me is the damage which has been caused to migrant communities into the run-up of a Brexit vote during the Brexit campaign, where the sort of Eastern European wording has been used and abused in so many situations, been used and abused in all the press releases, and the picture of Eastern European migrants living in the UK has been shown from only one perspective, the bad perspective. And on the basis of that, a lot of people casted the vote in a ballot paper. And I really think that was a breaking point for many families like mine, thinking, well, hold on a sec. 14 years ago, there was a recruitment agency coming out to our countries, paying for our flights to come over to UK, paying for our flights to go and visit family twice a year, paying for the accommodation just so we can come and work in here. And not many people thought, well, hold on a sec, they're going to bring families here. They're going to have their own kids. They're going to start buying our houses. They're going to start buying our sort of NHS services. No one thought about this. And all of a sudden, when we went to the situation where, yes, the services are, used and abused and overstretched because there was no much investment going into it, all of a sudden, the mood is changing. And then, the big parties are blaming migrant population for it and trying to reach the masses of people which made their own opinion on the basis of what they read in the press, which is absolutely disgusting for me. And coming over here, I choose to come to the free country. So, you'd have to remember that
one of the key things that we did last year in that referendum was to vote to remove our own freedoms. Not just ours, of course, but yours as well. Voting against freedoms. Freedoms are bad.
And James, I remember that, and this is why I cannot get my head about trading our freedom for the choices of having more spaces in NHS, having a little bit more pounds in the pocket, which is not confirmed because we might have a little bit less pounds in the pocket.
The Bank of England governor confirmed yesterday that certainly in the foreseeable future we will categorically be less well off. But hey, better a poor master than a rich servant, as I think the multimillionaire Michael Caine said. So your wife and children have gone? They've gone back to Poland?
Yes, they went on Monday. So Monday was the last time when I actually taken them to the Luton airport, and they fly over. And I spoken to my missus yesterday, and she just said to me that whether we're gonna make it. I know it's only one day, but
yeah.
She comes with an attitude that we're definitely going to make it and love it over there, for some other reasons, not only, the Brexit situation. But
she was working here, was she, Radek?
Yes, she was a nursery nurse, so she was looking after British kids and children in a nursery.
Just say that again, Radek, will you?
She worked in a nursery as a nursery nurse, nursery assistant. So she was caring after the British, English.
Coming over here, looking after our children.
Pretty much, that's it.
Are you going to go? Or what needs to change to make Britain feel like a welcoming place for someone who wants to look after our children again?
Well, for me, as I said to you, James, for me, the damage has been done already. And I understand that, we are early day of the Brexit process. It might go, whichever way we can only imagine. But
it's the atmosphere that's changed.
The atmosphere has changed. And I must admit, there was 14 years of very happy life, and I probably had to deal with a racist situation maybe once or twice or maybe 3 times. And what's funny about me, James, is I'm actually running a integrational project. For the last 7 years, I ran an integrational project for migrant communities and British communities to get together.
Coming over here, helping people integrate.
Pretty much, that's it. This is my full-time job.
Looking after children.
Exactly. And on some point, I believe that people like me are becoming victims of our own beliefs. Because for the years, I believe that, when you come to different country, you have to integrate. And this is very very normal process. You know, you have to know the culture, you have to know your neighbors, you have to know the language, you have to know the people. And you know, for the last 14 years, I've been following it very, very strongly, and I've been teaching other people to do it, because this is the way forward. You know, if you want to have a sort of a healthy community, local community, mixed community, you have to know each other quite well. But then, you know, when the Brexit campaign
I'm very late for the news. I think I'm going to come back, Radek. I don't know if anyone's ever told you this before, but you have a way of telling a story that's utterly compelling. However, I just noticed the time. I do apologise. Radek, stay where you are. It's 10:32. You'll allow me to describe this as British values. Simon Parry has been in touch, if you've been listening to Radek's story, to... I think you'll like this, Radek. Simon says... let me get this right. I live 15 miles away. I know it's small compensation, but if Radek wants a beer and a chat, the drinks are on me, and I'll be happy to drive to Hinckley. Unfortunately, Radek, I don't think you're going to be there much longer, are you?
Really, to be honest, I'm packing up my bags now and moving for the next few months to Yorkshire area. Obviously, I had to downsize my house now for the time being. So my missus and kids left. I don't need a 3-bedroom house, so I'm moving to Doncaster, where I'm going to spend next few months making up some important decision of how and what I want to do when I return back to the country. And obviously, I've got a few more things to sort of work out before I decide to leave the UK for long.
Final question, I promise, because I've taken up most of your morning. I understand your position clearly, and I mean, you won't be surprised to learn that there are, a cavalcade of people describing similar experiences who we're going to hear from. But the question that you may not be able to answer, but I'm going to ask anyway, is why people would now be applying to come here on a much smaller level. So is the message that you described to me also playing out back in Poland? The number of national insurance numbers registered to countries like Poland has gone off a cliff. Why do you think that is?
Well, this is a surprise for me as well, and I don't really know. It could be something which I'm going to be exploring, because part of the things which I'm going to be doing is probably when I move back to Poland, is probably telling to people how to best prepare themselves for the massive movement back to the country. And I have to confirm, I've seen statistics last quarter back in Poland, and that was the very first quarter since I think 2004, where the net migration was lesser than a net. No, don't have the right. There was less people leaving Poland than
coming back.
And coming back to Poland, yes. And that was a historical sort of statistic. Confirms that.
Well, it would tally with economic performance. The countries with the higher economic growth have become more attractive to people with the wherewithal and the kind of confidence and courage to cross countries in search of a better life. Radek, I wish you well. And will you keep in touch, Radek? Will you let me know how things go on? Because I sense you've got no hope now that things are going to turn back around to the country that you came to.
No, James. I'm actually, I said yesterday, I'm actually starting to write a book. It's going to be a book for British people to actually, to present them with all 15 years of the processes which a family like mine has to go through.
That's really interesting.
And then getting a slap in the face and sort of,
So thanks ever so much for coming over here, running integration projects between communities and looking after British children in nurseries. We don't want your sort over here. I will leave you with a line of my late father's, Radek, who was a journalist, and whenever I said to him during periods of unemployment that I was going to write a book, do you know what he used to say to me?
Yeah, come on.
He'd say, "Neither am I, son, neither am I." So good luck with that.
Okie doke. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
God bless. It's 20 minutes to 11. Raj is in Canning Town. Raj, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello. Well, I've just been listening to the past callers, and to be honest with you, I'm Indian, and my partner, or my ex-partner rather, she's Polish, and we have a 4-year-old son together.
Yes.
And as things are changing, she's starting to feel very uncomfortable here.
Oh, God.
And
it's your boy, of course.
I'm born here, so...
No, but if she goes back to Poland, she's taking your son with her.
Exactly. And the thing is, this is what I call home. Here is what I call home, South East London. So where am I going to go? Do you know? Do I go to Poland, or do I...
Not allowed to, mate. We voted against freedom of movement.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it makes me feel sad. I mean, honestly, when as soon as I heard you earlier, I was wondering what's going on. You know, how do we fix this? I mean, I grew up in southeast London. To be honest with you, it wasn't the friendliest area. I mean, I have childhood memories from like way back.
Of course.
And it's not pleasant. You know, we went through some. I mean, I don't know if I can describe it over the radio or.
Well, don't use any words you wouldn't use in front of your 4-year-old son, and we'll be fine.
Yeah. We've had people outside of our house, you know, 20 plus, you know, threatening my father, maybe because he wasn't such a great person either. You know, he's not easy to get along with, but. You know,
I tell you what, I want you to write a book as well, Raj. It's like Radek, you can't. It's all these questions left unanswered.
But I mean, we stayed, we persevered, and to be honest with you, it felt like home.
And that huge progress had been made socially, economically, materially, exactly. and I mean,
it feels like we're going backwards. To be honest with you.
Well, we are. I mean, we are deliberately going backwards. That is the decision that we've taken to vote against freedom.
Yeah, it's a huge shame.
What can you do? Why is your ex discomforted by what's happened recently? What's changed for her?
Work for even in works, basically how people talk. You know, I can't say too much, but her boss, for example, you know how he approaches different ideas now in comparison to what he did before. He's more open about certain things, and so for her, it feels as if it's a completely different person that she knows now.
Because he's felt emboldened to, and some of these people might not have been nursing these vile views before. No. They just might feel that that's trendy now. That's the fashion. You've got to be talking about how much you hate foreigners all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the big propaganda machine, of course, you know, that tells you one thing or another, and you know, it gets into your mind.
It does. And actually, you're the third person in 2 days to tell me that. 2 of them off air and you on air, that the atmosphere at work has changed. The atmosphere at work was different. Roger, I hope things work out. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to keep amassing the evidence that there's a question we need to ask, and then in the coming months we can move towards hopefully answering it. How do you make people like the mother of Raj's child, who's considering returning to Poland, or Radek, whose wife's already gone, got rid of another nursery nurse? How do you reverse this tide, I suppose we'd have to call it? 0345 6060 973. Enrique is in Hackney. Enrique, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I spoke with you a couple of times before. Still as nervous as the first time, but do my best.
Good man.
Last time I called you, it was must have been about a couple of years ago. I remember I was in Bridlington and I was doing a tour of the UK, just between jobs on the motorbike, and I was telling you how amazed I was by the beauty of this country.
You loved it. At Bridlington, did you say?
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, you were going to some of the sort of more old-fashioned holiday resorts, as it were.
Yeah, I did that on the motorbike.
Yes,
yeah, that's right.
I remember that. Wow. Normally I don't remember. I mean, I take a lot of calls. It's no offence to anybody who I don't remember, but you were full of the joys of Britain. You were actually kind of almost singing Rule Britannia as you tooled your way through the byways and highways of the nation.
There you go, and I had a chance to visit lots of the Yorkshire Dales, Lake District, Peak District, quite a few national parks, and I still sing the joys of the country. To be honest, yes. I've been here for 10 years now, and I have to say, in the 10 years I did a degree in history. So I got a chance to study the history of this country, which is amazing. After that, I started working, and I have to say, I'm very lucky with the job that I have. And by the way, I pay a lot in taxes every month. Yes. And then the people I've met and so on. And then I've also spent a lot of time working in youth clubs. I've been serving for 2 years.
Coming over here, studying our history, working in youth clubs. Who do you think you are, honestly?
Yeah, and I'm a serving special constable as well. So I've been serving for 2 years now.
You do volunteer police work on our streets?
Yeah, for the last 2 years. I'm still doing it about 30 years a month of my free time. So, last year when the vote came, I was traveling in Spain and listening to you actually the day of the referendum, and it was a low hit. It felt quite personal, and it's like, this is a country I've been here for 10 years. Yeah. I absolutely love it. I dedicate my time. It was quite. I took it quite personally, and I was a bit down. And I have to say, listening to you over the last few months. It's quite encouraging, and thinking about it, I thought of two things actually. And again, considering the history of the country, for all its positive things, there is. I think that the feeling that what you get now is nothing new really. It's been around for ages. You look at the British Empire, theories of genesis and so on. it's always been there. And what I think
it's cyclical, and you know that old line about people who don't learn from history are condemned forever to repeat it. It's your grasp of history that means you're cursed. You now have to watch people who haven't learned from history repeat it, and you can see what's happening.
Exactly, and all I think it is now is just coming to surface, facilitated very much by the media, but it's nothing new. And that probably is something that is made me feel quite a bit more positive, thinking, well, it's nothing new.
This too will pass would be the phrase, wouldn't it? And the reason why you find this programme encouraging is because you recognise that the picture painted by the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and the Sun and all these other outlets is not actually reality. It's some people's reality. It's what some people desperately hope is reality, but it's not what most decent, intelligent people possessed of Christian values, I'll use that phrase because I'm talking about values, not faiths and beliefs. That's the country you moved to, that's the country you fell in love with, and that's the country that we'll somehow get back to one day.
Exactly, and so it's thinking that, it's listening to you, but also talking to all the many different...
Well, if we did that, but then that's what makes Radek's departure so depressing, because he's dedicated the last 7 or 8 years of his life to actually building bridges between Eastern European and native-born people, and now the atmosphere has become so toxic that he's hanging up his headphones and going back to Poland. Enrique, take care. You didn't mention Norfolk on your list. If you've still got the bike, check out North Norfolk. It is, for my money, among the most beautiful parts of Britain. It's 10:47. I haven't got room for any employers. My phone, just asking a question I hoped would get no answers today, which is, are we a changing country? Are there warnings coming from the city, from the hospitality industry, from the NHS, from farmers, from the retail sector? Are these warnings of an emigration crisis, people quitting this country on an unprecedented scale? Are they tallying with your experience? And is it a question of the national atmosphere changing? And sometimes when I tell you that I hope the phones don't ring, I don't really mean it, because obviously I'd have to inflict my thoughts upon you uninterrupted for 3 hours. But on this one, I really wish they were ringing a bit less. Not least because I haven't got room for employers at the moment. Have we got any employers on the board? We'll try and find out. I'd maybe free up a couple of lines. Just hearing also, breaking news, that the Duke of Edinburgh has been admitted to hospital. This as the Queen prepares to make her way to the House of Commons for a Queen's speech. And that is where our political editor, Theo Usherwood, awaits. It's an altogether different spectacle to the usual one today, Theo. Tell us what and tell us why.
Let's start with that, James. The Queen will be arriving by car, not by the Golden State carriage. She'll be entering via the Sovereign entrance, and then she would usually go to the robing rooms to have a crown placed on her head, the imperial crown placed on her head, and to be dressed in the robes of state before leading a procession through the Royal Gallery into the House of Lords and sitting on the throne in all her majesty. But of course, given the appalling events at Grenfell and London Bridge and Manchester, this is, for the first time in 43 years, been toned down. She'll be arriving by car. She'll be wearing a hat, not a crown, and she will simply sit on the throne in what is termed by Buckingham Palace as day dress. This is the first time since 1974. I have been on to some experts on this, and the reason that happened in 1974 was because there were 2 Queen's speeches, and there wasn't enough time when it came to the second Queen's speech to put together all the pageantry that is involved. Nevertheless, security here, James, is incredibly tight. Armed police are lining the streets around Parliament Square. Tourists, I think, might be a little bit disappointed they're having their photos taken, all waiting expectantly for the Queen to arrive. But it will not be like in usual years. And this is a Queen's speech that won't be like usual years either. It's, to say the least, watered down. There is very little in it. Let's start with the Great Repeal Bill. This is, of course, this came up in the last Parliament. It translates EU laws and regulations into British laws and regulations. It's a little bit of a Thursday night dinner, a microwave reheat. But nevertheless, Theresa May, the Prime Minister, doesn't have much else to put into the speech. On the domestic side, well, actually, let's keep with the Brexit side. There's a customs bill, and that sets up the framework for when we leave the European Union. We have a trade bill, and that sets up independent trade deals for when we leave the European Union. We have an immigration bill that brings to an end the freedom of movement and sets up our own framework to control our own borders. We have a fisheries bill, so we can control our own waters. A nuclear safeguards bill that brings in EU standards when it comes to the safe management of nuclear power plants into British law. Obviously, the safeguards exist in European law. And then on the other side of the domestic side of things, we have the travel protection bill.
Just to clarify, they exist in British law as well, but after we leave the European Union, they won't. So we need to have our own sort of fallback position, but the laws will be identical.
Yes, you're quite right, James. We've then got the travel protection bill. That adds, it adds further protections for people going on holiday. The civil liability bill, that means that if you're in it makes it harder to claim whiplash claims for when. So
I'm going to stop you there, Theo, because you're going to spoil the suspense for all the people waiting to hear the actual speech. This is like shaking the presents under the Christmas tree.
Should we do what's not in the speech then?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have any social care reform bills.
Dementia tax.
Dementia tax. That's not been included because, of course, Theresa May would stand no chance of getting it through. Then grammar schools. There was going to be an education reform bill of some description to make it easier for schools to select pupils according to academic ability. Ditto. That's not been included because, of course, Theresa May couldn't get it through the House of Commons because she has a majority at the moment. Well, she doesn't have a majority at the moment because she hasn't done a deal with the DUP. That's going to come, hopefully, tomorrow.
DUP warned yesterday that they'd been struck by the lack of negotiating talent and experience that the British government has.
Yes, and of course there aren't any major negotiations coming up, are there?
No, none. Thank God for that. That would be really awkward.
Just to give you. Just to do the sequencing on this, and I think the sequencing is important because when Theresa May went to the palace on 12:30 on June the 9th, and this is something I've talked about before, she had to tell the Queen that she could form a government and she could command a majority of the House of Commons. Now, to do that, she had to rely on support from the DUP. Otherwise, she might have to say to the Queen, well, actually, I don't have a majority of the House of Commons, I'm going to go it alone. And then the Queen might turn around and actually say, and there is a possibility, it's not...
There's no precedent, though, is there?
There's no precedent of saying, I'm going to form a minority government and I can command the House of Commons when actually the numbers don't add up. So she had to rely on the DUP. I think that's the best way of explaining it.
Yes, so watch this space. We're going to run out of time. Who's John Godfrey and what's he done?
John Godfrey is the Director of Policy at Number 10. He's just quit. Now, that, of course, comes on top of the fact that Fiona Hill, Nick Timothy, the Joint Chief of Staff, quit before the election. Katie Perry, the Director of Communications, quit, along with the Press Secretary, Lizzie Loudon. Will Tanner, the Deputy Director of Policy at Number 10, has also quit. That means that actually there's hardly any of the team left from before the election in Theresa May's Downing Street.
And Strong and Stable has been replaced with Humble and Resolute.
Humble and Resolute,
Humility and Resolution.
Yeah.
So that's Strong, Stable, Humble, Resolute. They're the four. It would have been the 11 dwarves, but they didn't make the cut.
No.
Happy days?
Yeah. I'll report back.
You got cream on?
Sun cream?
Yeah.
It's baking hot. I have seen us.
It's a genuine question. Have you got sun cream?
No.
What?
I'm not going to get sunburned.
Why are you coming back to the studio, peeling all over the place?
I tell you what, I've seen
some sun cream on.
I've seen your milky
white
be telling
skin.
me to drink more water.
Yeah, stay hydrated and stay safe. Any news on the Day of Rage? There's a Day of Rage in the Daily Mail. I know what you're thinking. It's a Day of Rage every day in the Daily Mail, but this time they're reporting a Day of Rage. Any signs of any rages?
No, I've seen some people gathered outside the Department of Health, but no rage.
They're always there, aren't they?
No, very quickly though, I have seen a stretcher for any soldiers that collapse.
Oh gosh. And speaking of medical situations, we're hearing that Prince Philip's visit to hospital was essentially precautionary, but of course it means that Her Majesty the Queen, who I find myself nursing incredibly warm feelings towards, the warmest they've ever been in my life, she now has to go and do this shift at the House of Commons, utterly unnecessarily, without the support of her rock, Prince Philip. But hey, come on. Oh yes, fish. That Queen's speech we'll take live, of course, on LBC and then do a little bit of analysis afterwards. I've got 2 phone lines free. I don't want to put anybody off or sound ungrateful, but I'd really like to hear from employers in these sort of sectors. I don't imagine we're going to get any chief executives of merchant banks ringing in. They'll be too busy. What time is it? 3 minutes after 11. They'll be too busy sort of, I don't know, polishing their bullions. But I would like to hear from a hotelier, perhaps a restaurateur, somebody who is working in farming. I just had my little Alan Partridge moment with Enrique recommending the countryside of North Norfolk for his next excursion on his motorbike. But I mean, the idea that crops are going to suffer, are going to be unpicked, or what other sectors would we be looking at? If you're in the NHS, and I've just heard from Dr. Lauren Gavahan, who you remember from the junior doctors' strike. Remember when all those communists came into the studio to tell us that the policies were damaging the NHS, possibly fatally, and that the plight of junior doctors was a matter of serious national emergency? God, they certainly got proved wrong, didn't they? What, the NHS just going from strength to strength at the moment, funded to the rafters. She's been in touch to say that it's already happening, this exodus. This tallies with the numbers. But of course, as a working doctor, she'll be closer to the facts than I am. Of course, needless to say, I'm not going to be able to find her tweet now. It'll pop up in a minute, and that's the point. Why would you want to come here to be a nurse? We've had a pay freeze since 2010. You've had a real terms pay cut because inflation has overtaken the 1% pay rise freeze. Morale is going through the floor. The terms and conditions are changing. There are staff shortages, which makes the job much harder. And increasingly, we're hearing reports of abuse being directed at NHS professionals from the people they're actually there to treat on the grounds of, you guessed it, ethnicity and race. But, you know, fish. Asif's in Barnes. Asif, what would you like to say?
James, good morning. I would just want to say, so I was born in England, in London. I live in Barnes, which is a nice part of the world, but my father came to England in 1960. And he always used to tell me as we were growing up, it was always sort of no blacks, Irish or dogs. And are we going back to that point now, where it's maybe the actual the blacks, Irish bit has changed, but it's sort of the same. And we're at a point where we're well,
you tell me. I mean, you're. It's hard to tell whether someone's Irish or not just from looking at them. So I mean, I can't answer that. But you're presumably you're brown skinned, so are you detecting any change? I mean, I know Barnes extremely well. It doesn't really strike me as a particular crucible of race hate or negativity.
No. Well, we're very fortunate in where we live. We don't really have those sort of problems, but I'm also now so conscious. I never was up until about a year ago. My 18-year-old is at SOAS, and the first thing that happened after the terror attack on London Bridge.
Yes.
I just went and brought him home. He was in halls. I said, "You're coming home, and you're staying here." And I feel now that with there are only little pockets of incidents.
Why was that, Asif?
Because you just feel there's so many fruitcakes running around. It doesn't matter what persuasion.
You thought he might be targeted by someone who thought that they were somehow.
Well, not just him. It's just if it was a one attack or a multiple attack, you just don't know. And of course, the thing about all these incidences, whether it's the mosque or the Manchester, they're indiscriminate. They don't pick and choose who they're targeting. They're just picking.
Well, actually, you could probably. It's a live case, so we'll choose carefully. But if you attack a crowd outside, if anybody attacks a crowd outside a mosque just as prayers ends, I don't think that is indiscriminate. Oddly, obviously, a concert hall and Westminster bridges, but anyway, that's moot.
Yeah, well, so we're at a point where we're employed. We're only employed in a very small way, but we make a lot of money. We pay a lot of taxes, and we're happy to do so. We're thinking about now upping sticks and moving to Canada, where the rate of tax is even higher. But I don't care. I'll pay more taxes if we get a better country. And I think a lot of it, the Radic, they just wanted to make me cry because, the West Indies in the 50s and 60s, the Pakistanis and Bengalis in the 70s and 80s, and it's just his history, James, this is history repeating itself. If it wasn't the blacks, it was the Asians, the Polish. Who's next? It'll all be the same.
Go back to the Huguenots,
and it's just depressing.
The Irish, the Jews. It's everywhere.
It's always the same.
Usually takes an economic crisis, but also takes an appetite. It takes a taste.
But can I finish a slightly more of a positive note?
God, yes.
So when on the day of the tower fire last week, I was actually on my way home from some TV channel, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, I saw the plumes rising, and at 9-10 o'clock I was there with some of my friends and we're just trying to help where we could. But the amazing thing was, I mean, I'm brown. There were whites, blacks, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs. They're all there. Nobody's looking at me saying, oh, are you a Muslim?
That's my normal. That's my normal. That's your normal, and I don't understand.
This is what I'd say to Radic, James.
Yeah.
This is the country. I mean, I love this country. I was born 5 miles. I'm actually part of an act at the moment.
Yeah.
I was born in Wembley. I live in Barnes. My kids go to school here. My kids, you know, we're not. You can tick any box you like. We're basically we're as UK as the rest, as British as the rest. And in fact, the most amazing thing is I was outside Primark in King Street, Hammersmith, which you'll know, just down the road from where you live.
Well, yeah.
And I was filling up my cars with blankets and whatnot, and this totally random English lady who I'd never really have any cause to speak to, she came up and she said, "Oh, I want to hug you." And I said, "Well, okay." So we hugged. She was almost in tears. We said, "You know, it's amazing that actually, you know, we need more people that are just normal." And when she was referring to normal, she meant not the nutters, they're far left or the far right. And I thought, even though obviously it's a tragedy and many people lost their lives, it actually brought people together. And I would like to say to Radic, please don't give up just yet, because you know what? If people like him give up, and he's the voice, and in fact, Shah, you're that amazing caller yesterday, just before you finished, I was in tears.
Me too.
And I know we need people like you to not give up. I wouldn't say us. I'm not talking about me as a Muslim or a Pakistani. That's irrelevant. You know, people are too quick to put people in boxes. But please don't give up on London. I say to Radic, don't give up, because this is the best city in the world, and I surely pray that we've moved on from the no blacks, Irish or dog scenario.
Well,
if London gives up, we're all going to hell in a handcart, James.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong, and of course it's the people who are almost on side with the worldview, the no dogs, no blacks, no Irish, and will end up worse off. I mean, because if you do ever manage to eliminate ethnic minorities, it's the people at the bottom of the socio-economic pile who'll be next. That's the political project. That's what we're taught. Asif, thank you. Take care, mate. I like the upbeat attitude. The problem is, of course, that this negativity is driven by people who write about our home, London, where I've lived since I was 19, including a long period of time in the shadow of Grenfell Tower. People write about our town, our communities and our homes, usually from, I don't know, a sort of lovely corner of Cornwall, or from Idaho, Wyoming or Texas, and describe a city that we don't recognise. Those of us who live here read about no-go areas and read about appalling situations and scenarios that have been deliberately visited upon communities by new arrivals. I don't recognise the London that these people who've never left Texas describe. They turn on Fox News and see some Herbert describing absolute nonsense, describing towns and cities that don't exist, and then they go away with these lines about no-go areas. It's quite incredible, but hey. 11:11 is the time. Mihai is in Harlow. Mihai, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time caller.
Very welcome.
Okay. Every day I'm listening to BBC like 3-4 hours, and now I just heard the Radic, so very emotional and stuff like this. I'm a Romanian. I came here like 6 years ago. I really love this country, mate. It's the best country in the world, I swear to you. I swear, mate, if you are a hard worker, you can accomplish anything you will in this country. So can I just tell you quick my story?
Of course. Well, I mean, quite as long as it is quite quick.
So I came like 6 years ago. Somebody paid for my ticket to come here. Basically, I did not have nothing. So I came here. From the second day, I tried to get my insurance number, stuff like this. They refused me like 5 times from the insurance. I don't know, all the time finding some stuff. So I go to a lawyer. Then he told me what to do. He put me for a school. I paid for the school and for the lawyer like 2,500. I never been to school. Just I need a paper that to be able to show them that I'm a school. So we go for immigration. They give us blue card for me, yellow card for my wife, and with that because I really want to work, to pay taxes, to work legal, to have an insurance number for the second day.
Sure.
Of course, all this process took like 4 or 5 months. It's very hard to find work. Working for £30 in hand car wash and stuff like this, but never give up. So shortly after I get all the paper, I bring my wife here too. We'll get all the paper, insurance number, everything. We try working on legal, pay taxes. After 4 years, I succeed to buy my own house in Harlow. So what I'm trying to say, if you're a hard worker and you really never give up, you can accomplish a lot of things.
Except that you, under the terms that most people supporting Brexit describe as being around the corner next, you wouldn't have been allowed in.
Everything, to be honest, before everybody, even on my street, I feel a change now. Because after that, Mr. Nigel Farage say on the TV, he will never gonna live on the street with Romanian neighbors. He changed a lot of stuff, to be honest. I like him. He's a pretty intelligent guy, so I really do not understand why he did that thing. You know what I mean?
Well, he's one or the other, mate. He's either a pretty intelligent guy or he said that thing.
Even now, after 2 years, so I'm trying to go step forward on the property ladder. I'm working for council. I'm a maintenance officer. So
coming over here, looking after our social housing.
Yes, mate. For example, for 10 houses, 4 houses Pakistani, 4 houses British, only 2 houses Eastern European, maybe. So I don't really understand where is coming all this hate.
Well, you did. Well, I don't want you to understand it. It would break my heart to explain it to you. But I'm glad. And please, God, stay upbeat, Mihai. Stay upbeat. It's coming up to 11:15. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Tommy Lester's on form. James, immigrants do not feel welcome in this country because of you and your ilk. So, Mihai, can I apologise if it's people like me that make you feel unwelcome?
It's not that a problem. My wife, she's a nurse. She make all the training here. Now she's a team leader. She's taking care of all people. One day, can I just tell you a quick story? One day...
No, I'm sorry. I've hit the travel news, but you filled your boots, my friend. 0345 6060 973. Izzy, before we go, please let these wonderful, wonderful callers know that us decent folk are embarrassed by the treatment they are experiencing and we want them to stay. Unfortunately, Izzy, it's not enough. Not unless you can buy a newspaper in the next couple of days and actually start resisting this tidal wave of nonsense and hatred that people are being swept away by. A 96% decrease in the number of applications to nurse in this country from trained and qualified Eastern European nurses. Some of that training, of course, would have been funded with the money that we pay into the European Union as a net contributor. And then the people who are already here leaving in unprecedented numbers. I'm just wondering why. 0345 6060 973. The number of Eastern Europeans in general applying for national insurance numbers has gone off something of a cliff. It's close to half of the number in the first 3 months of this year compared to the same period last year, and it spreads a little further as well. It seems to me to be about atmosphere, but I don't know that. You tell me, okay? I'm just asking a question. I'm giving you the numbers, and you're giving me the answers to the question of why. What's changing? What's changed? And of course, if you're part of the problem, if you've created this atmosphere of toxicity, here's what you need to do to me, right? You need to say it's my fault. So if you're one of these people that wanted your country back and gave your borders and immigrants and don't want Romanian neighbours, this is all my fault because I ask people what is happening to them and they tell me, and that is whipping up negativity and making people feel unwelcome. Don't forget that. It's very important you get that clear, okay? I know you need an awful lot of help understanding complicated issues if you're in that constituency of the country. So when you hear people describing being victims of racist abuse, when you hear people describing being victims of bullying, nastiness, violence, worse, having their headscarves pulled off or being spat at in the street, when you hear that, it's all the fault of people like me, okay? It's very important you get that straight. And I wish I was joking. That is the logic of these loons. That is the actual logic now, I guess, inevitably, in a country where, according to one article I read yesterday in an American magazine, levels of division and disunity are the highest they've been since the 17th century, when we had a civil war between, I don't know, people who disagreed about monarchy. Kinga's in Brighton. Kinga, what's going on?
Morning, James. I apologize in advance because I'm overly excited every time when I call you. So if I start talking without a sense, please stop me.
Well, it's the same here. If I start talking nonsense, you stop me, all right?
I will. Okay, promise. Yeah, I'm Polish. I've been living here for last 7 years. I got my family over here. I mean, I met the boyfriend here. We've got a lovely son. He's 4 years old. He's going to start to school. In fact, we're going to the settling session in a while. We want to stay here. This is our home at this moment. But I have in the back of my head that thought that living here might become really difficult. And I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, I'm in a limbo at this moment. But, I'm a resident, but I don't know if my residency will be taken, considered.
The European Union laid out in April the requirements to make people like you feel safer, but we've declined to sign up to that immediately.
Exactly. So that's one thing. The other thing is that government can make our life really difficult. I mean, in terms of mortgage, I don't know, and other things like even NHS, you've mentioned that before. This is for the very first time. My son has a bit of breathing problems, nothing really serious at this moment, but we're trying to stay on touch, keeping a hand on the pulse. And first time in 7 years of me being here, living here, paying taxes, I've been asked to fill up the form that I'm entitled to the medical service. I understand the reasons why, but my son was born here.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing that could be checked out. And the amount of money that is going to be spent on it, because someone has to send those forms, someone has to check out these forms, someone has to put them into the system, it's just ridiculous. So at this moment, we're not giving up the hope. We're staying. Hope is what makes us human. This is what about being human, enjoying the lovely country, integrating and all those lovely things. But if times come up and our lives become really, really difficult, then we will leave. Simple as that. And what I feel really sorry about all my English friends, because I got quite a few of them,
sure.
I have where to go. I can always go back to the European Union. I can move to Canada. I can go back to Poland. Where you gonna go, guys? Where you gonna, if the times, if the situation become really difficult for you guys, where you gonna go? That's the question. Will you be able to stay in your country and live under circumstances?
You say that. James in Worthing, just up the road from you, actually. He's texted while you were talking. So I work in manufacturing. I hope David Davis negotiates to retain freedom of movement, because at some point I'm almost certainly going to have to relocate to Germany or a country with a functioning economy when this ship starts sinking. Let's hope they're more welcoming to economic migrants than we are, because there could be a few of us.
Well, this is beautiful about people being able to move freely between the countries.
Freedom's bad. Freedom's bad. You're reading the wrong newspapers. Down with freedom.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm a naive person who really dreams about unity and equality and freedom and love and peace and everything.
Yeah, down with you and your sort. It's a day of rage today, Kinga. You're on the wrong bus.
Okay. Anyway, thanks a million.
No, thank you, and take care. And I hope your little boy stays safe, stays well. Gavin's in Oxford. I hope your anger dissipates, mate. I really do, because two wrongs don't make a right, let us say. He writes, the damage has been done, James. My wife is a pharmacist involved in clinical trials, coming over here, helping us create safe and effective medicines. Clinical trials serving this country for 15 years. I want a diamond hard Brexit now, so she's forced to leave, and preferably she'll be high-fiving all the returning British immigrants who burden this country and blight our nation, says Gavin in Oxford, a very angry man. You'd be angry too if after 15 years of working to serve the community in which you live, you felt that the community had delivered a round clear off to you. I'm keeping an eye on the screen, bearing in mind that Black Rod is about to do his stuff. I tell you, someone's just said only in this country, only in the UK, would a pared down ceremony, a kind of dressed down ceremony, involve a woman in a diamond hat being ferried from one palace to another by a chauffeur-driven car. But actually, there is a lot less pageantry than usual as we prepare for that Queen's speech, a speech that we will take live. As and when it begins. It's imminent. I'd say 5 minutes or so if you're wondering. 11:26 is the time. Zivile is in Romford. I probably pronounced that incorrectly. My apologies if I did. What would you like to say?
It's fine. It's Zivile, but
Zivile.
I get it all the time.
Zivile.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it.
So I came to UK when I was 11. I came to Essex. I came 3 years after my dad did. And he came to UK before we were part of EU. So it was obviously really, really hard for him to enter the country. But he came with a lot of money in his pocket. He set up a company. He had a partner who unfortunately ended up killing himself. And my dad completely losing the company and becoming just a normal carpenter.
Right.
But obviously because my family's really close, we still ended up coming to UK. We didn't want to live in a council house because we knew, at least my dad kind of knew that, if you get a council house, you're going to be seen as a typical Eastern European immigrant. So we decided to just get an apartment and see whether we can buy one. So we came, and about 5 months later, we had a massive fire and we lost the apartment. We had to run out in the middle of the night. We lost all our stuff. all that we had was our pajamas and, and passports. And that kind of led us to end up living in a council house, a small council house, which my parents still live in. And I think that kind of put us in a position where we were basically seen as the typical immigrants.
By whom? By whom?
I think maybe my friends, people around. My parents live in a small town in Essex. It's just a part of the Thurrock area, which I think gained the most UKIP vote in the last general election.
Yes.
So you can imagine what it's like over there, the people
I can't
that
actually.
stones thrown through glasses. When I was in school, I was 12, and I was called Hitler and Stalin. Basically, that was just my name. Nobody really knew my name. And, kind of, I'd say maybe during my teenage years, during university years, I was fine. I felt like I was living in London. There was multiculturalism, and I felt part of something. And I think when Brexit, the first talks of Brexit started happening, I felt like, oh my God, this is all coming back. And right now, I get these questions out, because I've been here so long. I'm 24 now, so I've been here half of my life, more than half of my life. I don't really feel fully Lithuanian or fully English, and I think there are a lot of kids that came to UK and feel the same way. And I think now we feel like we have to make some kind of decision.
Do you really? I don't want to. I don't want it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why? What has materially changed so profoundly that you face these life choices today that you didn't face 2 years ago?
I think it's the fear that I will have to face them, and maybe I deal with it a lot of the time. But I think it's that we all want to see a clear future. And I think
so in terms of stability,
it's not as clear anymore.
No, stability
exactly.
and clarity, and I mean, however you approach these negotiations, the bottom line is that the opportunity to simply say yes, we can safeguard the rights of all of our British citizens in Europe and all of our European Union citizens in Britain. We could do that, and for some reason, our negotiating strategy is that we didn't do that back in April or indeed yesterday when negotiations started. It's still not time to say that we won't. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll sign off on that really quickly and Zavile and people like her can relax a bit. Fingers crossed. Hope makes us human. That was the previous caller, wasn't it? What a beautiful, beautiful thing to say. Please stay. And one of the most charming parliamentary traditions of our islands is currently underway in Westminster as the members of Parliament, the members of the House of Commons, have been commanded by Black Rod to attend upon Her Majesty the Queen in the House of Lords. So you now see people who are ordinarily sworn enemies milling through the lobby, chatting amiably and backslapping. As you remember that despite being sworn enemies, members of Parliament are, of course, colleagues as well, and often friends across the political divides. We've probably got 2 or 3 minutes until Her Majesty starts speaking, and we will take to the Queen. Unfortunately, I'm not David Dimbleby. I'm not very good at doing the live description of an essentially unchanging situation. You could sort of sit here and go, oh look, there's John McDonnell. Good grief, he's looking a little bit ropey around the edges. But all you've got in terms of the visuals at the moment is television cameras following the passage of people out of the House of Commons towards the House of Lords. It's a tradition that dates back to Charles I, doesn't it? And the refusal to allow him into the House of Commons, and that sort of marking, in many ways, the beginning of the glorious revolution, as Oliver Cromwell supporters called it. And it again highlights this strange constitution, unwritten constitution that we have in this country, where the Queen is, of course, the head of state, but exercises no executive power, as it were. LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood is on the line, so you can fill a bit of space now, Theo.
Well, I'm looking at MPs queuing down.
No, I've done that.
You've done that. Okay,
Yeah.
Central lobby going in, and now Speaker John Bercow going straight in to the bar of the House. Of course, MPs are not allowed beyond the bar of the House of Lords. That is in our constitution.
That's a bar as in a bar, not a bar as in a bar, of course.
Yes, nobody's pulling any pints or anything. It's not, I'll have a pint of Heineken, please, Queenie. No, the Queen is ready to read the Queen's speech. It is not on goat skin. That's austerity kicking in there. It is just written on paper, parchment paper. This is quite a long process that's taking place. You can see I'll describe John Bercow at the bar of the House, which isn't a bar, next to the Black Rod, and now the Justice Secretary, Lord Chancellor David Lidington, of course he's a European, is pro-European, is kneeling at the feet of the Queen to hand over the speech. It's in a booklet which...
she's attended, actually, I should have mentioned this sooner, she's attended by Prince Charles because, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh has been taken to hospital, we're told, for a precautionary procedure.
Yes, and the dressed down Queen's speech Wednesday also applies to Prince Charles, who is in a morning suit, not in the full regalia, of course, all the medals and so forth that he would usually wear for such an occasion. At the front, now she's just about to start
and
speaking.
here comes Her Majesty the Queen.
Commons. My government's priority is to secure the best possible deal as the country leaves the European Union. My ministers are committed to working with Parliament, the devolved administrations, business and others to build the widest possible consensus on the country's future outside the European Union. A bill will be introduced to repeal the European Communities Act and provide certainty for individuals and businesses. This will be complemented by legislation to ensure that the United Kingdom makes a success of Brexit, establishing new national policies on immigration, international sanctions, nuclear safeguards, agriculture and fisheries. My government will seek to maintain a deep and special partnership with the European allies and to forge new trading relationships across the globe. New bills on trade and customs will help to implement an independent trade policy, and support will be given to help British businesses export to markets around the world. My ministers will strengthen the economy so that it supports the creation of jobs and generates the tax revenues needed to invest in the National Health Service, schools, and other public services. My government will continue to improve the public finances while keeping taxes low. It will spread prosperity and opportunity across the country through a new modern industrial strategy. My government will work to attract investment in infrastructure to support economic growth. Legislation will be introduced to ensure the United Kingdom remains a world leader in new industries, including electric cars and commercial satellites. A new bill will also be brought forward to deliver the next phase of high-speed rail. My government will continue to work to ensure that every child has the opportunity to attend a good school and that all schools are fairly funded. My ministers will work to ensure people have the skills they need for the high-skilled, high-wage jobs of the future, including through a major reform of technical education. The national living wage will be increased so that people who are on the lowest pay benefit from the same improvements in earnings as higher-paid workers. My ministers will seek to enhance rights and protections in the modern workplace. My government will make further progress to tackle the gender pay gap and discrimination against people on the basis of their race, faith, gender, disability, or sexual orientation. Legislation will be brought forward to protect the victims of domestic violence and abuse. My government will reform mental health legislation and ensure that mental health is prioritised in the National Health Service in England. Proposals will be brought forward to ban unfair tenant fees, promote fairness and transparency in the housing market, and help ensure more homes are built. My ministers will work to improve social care and will bring forward proposals for consultation. My government will ensure fairer markets for consumers. This will include bringing forward measures to help tackle unfair practices in the energy market to help reduce energy bills. A priority will be to build a more united country, strengthening the social, economic and cultural bonds between England Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. My government will work in cooperation with the devolved administrations, and it will work with all of the parties in Northern Ireland to support the return of devolved government. A new law will ensure that the United Kingdom retains its world-class regime protecting personal data, and proposals for a new digital charter will be brought forward to ensure that the United Kingdom is the safest place to be online. Legislation will also be introduced to modernise the court system and to help reduce motor insurance premiums. My government will initiate a full public inquiry into the tragic fire at Grenfell Tower to ascertain the causes and ensure that the appropriate lessons are learnt. To support victims, my government will take forward measures to introduce an independent public advocate who will act for bereaved families after a public disaster and support them at public inquests. My ministers will continue to invest in our gallant armed forces, meeting the NATO commitment to spend at least 2% of national income on defence, and delivering on the Armed Forces Covenant across the United Kingdom. My government will bring forward proposals to ensure that critical national infrastructure is protected to safeguard national security. A commission for countering extremism will be established to support the government in stamping out extremist ideology in all its forms, both across society and on the internet, so it is denied a safe space to spread. In the light of the terrorist attacks in Manchester and London, my government's counter-terrorism strategy will be reviewed to ensure that the police and security services have all the powers they need, and that the length of custodial sentences for terrorism-related offences are sufficient to keep the population safe. My ministers will ensure that the United Kingdom's leading role on the world stage is maintained and enhanced as it leaves the European Union. As a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, committed to spending 0.7% of national income on international development, my government will continue to drive international efforts that increase global security and project British values around the world. My government will work to find sustainable political solutions to conflicts across the Middle East. It will work to tackle the threat of terrorism at source by continuing the United Kingdom's leading role in international military action to destroy Daesh in Iraq and Syria. It will also lead efforts to reform the international system to improve the United Kingdom's ability to tackle mass migration, alleviate poverty, and end modern slavery. My government will continue to support international action against climate change, including the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Prince Philip and I look forward to welcoming Their Majesties King Felipe and Queen Letizia of Spain on a state visit in July. My government will host the Commonwealth Summit in April of next year to cement its relevance to this and future generations. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other measures will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
And this concludes the Queen's speech, or one of the shortest Queen's speeches in living memory, and many would say perhaps one of the thinnest. May be reasons for that. Just off the top of my head, no surprises at all, except possibly would we have expected the mention of that Donald Trump state visit if it was actually going to go ahead? I think the reports from America that he didn't want to come until we promised to make him feel welcome, until we promised to make Britain a safe space for him, means that perhaps the little snowflake's not coming after all. The Queen's speech is over. I missed one of the most beautiful traditions of that ceremony, actually. Dennis Skinner, the beast of Bolsover, traditionally heckles at precisely the point that Blackrod completes the invitation to the House of Commons members to make their way to the House of Lords, and his heckle today was actually probably one of the best in recent years. Royal Ascot underway, so when Dennis Skinner's heckle today was get your skates on, the first race starts at 2:30. Theo Usherwood is on the line. No big surprises there, Theo, but the Donald Trump state visit appears to have been put on hold.
Very much so, James. If that state visit was going to happen, the Queen would have said something along the lines of, and I will welcome the United States President to Britain on a state visit. That wasn't said, and so that's all but confirmation now that the state visit will not go ahead. In terms of how light this Queen's speech was, it lasted 10 minutes, according to my watch. They usually last 15 to 20 minutes. There were 27 bills. 8 of them on Brexit. By comparison, there were 51 bills in 2015 going into the 2016 session. That's one session. Of course, this will last for 2 sessions, and that was put forward by David Cameron. So almost double the number of bills put forward by David Cameron for 1 year. So that gives you some indication of how light it was. Interesting points to pick out. I thought a special independent advocate for the victims of national disasters that's new. We hadn't heard about it before. Of course, Labour have asked that the Prime Minister ensures that the victims of the Grenfell disaster receive the necessary legal aid, so that when it comes to the public inquiry, they're properly represented and they don't face themselves going up against very capable, well-employed, well-paid lawyers for other parties. So that was particularly interesting. She also mentioned the Queen also mentioned social care, saying that the government would bring forward proposals to try and tackle the problem. We were expecting that, and I said to you beforehand, we were expecting that to be left out entirely.
It's a consultation on paying for social care, isn't it, effectively? So the bill as it was has disappeared, but the idea seems to have survived.
Yeah, the idea has survived. Grammar schools hasn't survived. We can say that for certain. There was no mention there of grammar schools in this one, and of course, people like the former Education Secretary Nicky Morgan is an opponent of that, and I'm sure she would have rallied with a few other Tory centre ground MPs to stop that from happening.
So, I mean, in terms of what it says about the government,
not a lot. Well, Theresa May can't afford to bring forward anything controversial. She can't afford to bring in
because she has no guarantee.
Because she has no authority.
So either way, something that would disappoint the moderate, the sensible side of the party, something that would disappoint the more chomping, the less sensible side of the party. The nature of her majority or her non-majority is such that she can't actually do much at all with confidence.
But there is, and I know the narrative would suggest that this is an old-fashioned point of view, but I think it's probably worth saying anyway. If you look at the fact that there's going to be legislation to protect the victims of domestic abuse, to stop them being cross-examined in a court by barristers. If you look at the fact there's going to be mental health legislation. Previously, the government has talked about what's known as parity of esteem, yes, saying that there has to be we need to treat mental health issues in the same way that we treat physical health issues. Actually, she's saying, the Queen said that the government should prioritise mental health issues. Theresa May is looking for things and needs to bring forward legislation where there can be consensus and agreement. And if you look at the legislation that has been mentioned by the Queen in this speech, it's quite consumer facing. It's stuff that affects all of our lives, and we would hope would...
Ghana's consensus, Ghana's majority. I think some slight wrinkles in that, isn't there, given that the cuts to mental health provision have been pretty severe during her period as Home Secretary and as Prime Minister. So a very cynical soul might suggest parity of esteem means that physical health and mental health services get cut equally.
That would be, and of course, if you look at the £8 million funding, we've done stuff on the research with the King's Fund, where actually they've taken from the Department of Health budget, which is the capital programs for hospitals and so forth, to fund the NHS, to make that £8 million so that they keep the promise. Simon Stevens said to say that the NHS in the last, under David Cameron, received an extra £8 million was stretching it. And he is, of course, the chief executive of the NHS.
No fox hunting either.
No fox hunting. No, that was no fox hunting.
Why are you laughing? That was a big policy announcement, wasn't it?
But that would be a free vote, of course. And Theresa May was banking on the fact that because it's a free vote and she was going to win this landslide with more than 100 seats, that she could get it through, even though there'd be a pushback from her own side. And no mention of, and this is the first time I mentioned the story, no mention of the ivory ban. Overturning the
what was the rationale behind that? I think I understand. There's a ban on trading in ancient ivory because it's the best way of safeguarding that there's no market for modern ivory, for recently slaughtered elephants to have their tusks sold. So in order to just be belt and braces on that, they banned the trade in sort of 200-year-old statues.
Yeah, so you're quite right to point that out. So that people don't have an incentive to go and go out and shoot elephants to trade in ivory, they were going to overturn it. But of course, it went down very badly with the animal rights lobby, and it was a story that really wasn't touched by, for want of a better term, the mainstream media, but really gained a huge amount of traction.
It did. It was one of those hidden issues in the run-up to the election. A lot of people cast their vote according to the ivory and the fox issues, coupled with others, but they weren't getting Day of Rage, Enemies of the People style coverage in the mainstream press, were they, at all?
No.
I wonder if Prince William had something to do with that.
He could do. I mean,
his campaigning in the ivory arena has been pretty passionate and pretty powerful. So I wonder whether he turned a lot of people onto that story in a way that they weren't previously.
Absolutely,
alive.
And Prince Charles has written before, hasn't he, to ministers to say where he thinks that they may be misguided on policies.
Theo, off the top of my head, right? Stuff that was in the manifesto but wasn't in the Queen's speech. Ready?
Yeah.
Dementia tax, ending winter fuel allowance for wealthier pensioners, free school meals for every child, creating more grammar schools, pensions triple lock, and 10,000 new mental health professionals, and the cap on fuel bills.
Yeah.
And fox hunting.
All missing. Yeah.
So if you voted Conservative, what have you got?
Brexit?
Fish. You got cream on?
Stop bullying me.
Go and get some cream on you. I don't getting all tomatoey and beetroot. Theo Usherwood there, reporting live for LBC from the House of Commons, from the Houses of Parliament, where the Queen has just delivered a speech which is remarkable for what it didn't contain, I think it's fair to say. And of course, when Theo answered Brexit to that question, he was technically correct, but the whole point of the election was to strengthen her Brexit negotiating hand by delivering a much larger parliamentary majority. She even said that without a much larger parliamentary majority, they would be going into Brexit negotiations effectively scuppered, effectively hobbled. And of course, in the event, she lost 13 seats. But, you know, onwards and upwards. It's 12 noon. Vincent McAviney is at the hospital to which Prince Philip has just been taken, but he's clearly listening to Theo and I burbling away because he's just tweeted a photograph of his suntan lotion on Twitter, making sure he doesn't get a burnt nose. Our colleague Richard Souchet is making his way towards Shepherd's Bush Green, where the Day of Rage is due to start. And it's the wrong kind of rage, apparently, because the Daily Mail, which obviously indulges in provoking rage every single day, is very cross about this Day of Rage. It's the wrong kind of rage, or the wrong day of rage. We'll find out just how much rage there is at the Day of Rage, and whether or not the Daily Mail's rage about the so-called Day of Rage is actually justified rage or unjustified rage. Of course, it doesn't really matter, because what they're trying to do is make you rage about the Day of Rage, even if the Day of Rage doesn't contain any rage. Are we clear now? Good. Should we go to Marcus in Swiss Cottage? Poor bloke's been on hold for about 40 minutes. Marcus, I suspect you're not there anymore, are you?
No, I'm here. My brain feels a bit warmer, but...
I'm not surprised. You've just been sitting on hold all this time. I know I asked for business people to ring in to talk about the sort of recruitment scenario, and I know you've risen to that challenge, but I'm worried that you've been on hold for so long that your business might just have gone bust.
No. The doors just open up at 12 o'clock, but I've got staff for that for the moment, anyway. Until we'll have to get a bad deal. And that brings me to my point, really.
Yes.
Because I own a restaurant in central London, so I do hope I can furnish a sort of a pertinent example of what's happening. Certainly, in my experience, which I do believe is indicative of the conditions in the leisure industry, certainly in London. So we employ circa 35 people. It fluctuates slightly, but it's around that number. So we're a decent employer as far as restaurants are concerned, being a single venue. We opened our restaurant a year ago. We put out various advertisements for vacancies available. We use a lot of these sort of online portables, which is very effective, and it reaches a huge number of people. So at the time, we received sort of 80 applicants. Yes. A healthy sample, none of which I'd like to sort of annotate were native, in inverted commas.
Well, not one?
So, sorry?
Not one?
No, not one.
Out of 80 applicants. Just to be clear, when you talk about online portals or portables, I don't know what word you use. I'm 45 years old. I can't keep up with all of this jargon.
So we're talking Gumtree.
Yeah, but they're directed at an expat community, aren't they? They're directed at people from overseas a lot. Are they or not? I don't know.
Well, it's quite ubiquitous with those. However, it's a household name, so anyone serious about getting a job, particularly in the leisure, would utilise that. We're all quite internet savvy, so it's not like the website's written in Polish or anything. It's sure. It's a Western site. So last week we put out an ad for bar work and front of house work, one of our higher paid jobs, and received only three applications.
Oh,
so
shut up.
For me, when you say about the NHS and 90,
and the same type of advertising that you did, just remind me when you put up your first advert that got 80 responses.
That was April of last year.
So from April 2016 to June 2017, you had it's a similar sort of thing. You'd expect a similar level of response, and it's gone from 80 to 3.
Yeah, and the difference is palpable. It exists. It's real for me. It's not like it's just because it's summertime and everyone's going back home to Spain and Italy for 4 weeks. That's you'd expect then 13 applications, not 3.
Yes,
it really is now an employees market, where you say last year it was more of an employers market. Now I have the choice of increasing the wages I offer from £8.50 to say sort of £11-12. However, my rent isn't going to go down. My business rates are only going in one direction. The food products we purchase, etc., are getting more expensive and may go up even more when we leave the year without a good deal.
Andy Haldane of the Bank of England has just said he's ready to vote for a rise in interest rates, which means that's probably just hoved ever closer into view. So if you've borrowed any money to set up your business, your costs are actually going to go up.
Yeah.
Yes.
But here's the kicker. So my only commercial choice is in those circumstances would be to increase my prices to remain fiscal. And when I say fiscal, I don't mean I'm rocking up in a Bentley every day to work. I mean to pay myself a wage and return the investment, as you just said.
Yes.
So this immigration reduction is only going to sting the end user, the consumer, the average Joe. And it just never ceases to amaze me at how people are willing, sometimes fanatically, to vote for conditions that will punish themselves. It's just, you scratch your head and go, well, I'm going to have to, your dinner is going to cost more. I'm going to
be less well off. I'm going to be less well off already. But if I want to go out for some scran, it's going to cost me more than it would have done a year ago.
Yeah, and the more affluent people in London won't really feel that 1-2% increase. And that's the great irony, is because, the Brexit was kind of like, those disenfranchised people were rising up. And in fact, all the more affluent people in London won't really feel this. It is the average guy. So it's just, they're just punishing themselves.
At what point, I mean, I don't know how much projecting you've done, but at what point does your business become, did you fear for your business? Hopefully never. I'm absolutely clear about that. But I mean, that's a really stark, even with a little bit of, what do they call it, margin of error, from 80 applicants to 3 applicants in a year, and very much at the front line of recruiting young people from European Union countries. I mean, that's kind of central London restaurants. It's clear. So
all I can say is that our bread and butter sample of people has taken a massive knock. That's what I say. The pool of the well that we drew from is drying up. I'm not saying it's going to completely flatline, no, and there'll always be people looking for work, of course, but but I don't say the luxury, but the cherry picking that I could enjoy before isn't there today.
Now, I'm going to choose my words carefully now, but I know exactly what you mean by that, because sometimes when people talk about the need to replace foreign workers with and they use this kind of language, unpleasant though many people listening will find it, with our own or with, indigenous Brits. When I go, I use my local coffee shop as an example, actually, here in the West End, where the staff in there are really lovely. I know some of them by name. My mate Gary, the French polisher who works in the hotel round the corner, we hook up there in the mornings, have a bit of a chat, and we know that the people that work there, and they're very garrulous, that's the wrong word, they're very, they're bright, and they're breezy, and they're bubbly, and they're engaging, and there are loads and loads of British kids like that as well, but they've got jobs, the British kids who are like that. And I don't know who these people are, that if you can't hire, attractive is the word I'm looking for, but I don't mean physically. I guess physically is part of it as well if you're front of house. But, the cream of the crop. Whereas when they say, well, we'll replace them with our own, it will be when we use the young British people who can't really welcome 6 guests into your restaurant and show them to their table because they can't look you in the eye and they're too busy staring at their feet.
And I know this is a completely different subject, but the mentality's not there.
That's what I mean.
As we say, indigenous people, those being, the education, the media we've been exposed to, the expectations they've been promised, that they can go from the basement straight to the penthouse suite without all the steps in between. That this kind of culture would. So it's just not in their nature. I mean, if I stuck, as we say, indigenous as a kitchen porter job, I mean, he'd throw his towel down after a few hours. I'm not doing this. What do is you pay me £10. I've got too much pride for this. Where you get the other the Europeans, and I almost cry when I see how hard they work. I'm like, it's mad. You see how much dedication they put into the job, and we couldn't survive without them. I think that's the conclusion to the.
Well, that's the scary bit. You couldn't survive without them, and at the moment, hard Brexit gets rid of them. So we shall watch this space with interest. Marcus, thank you. I gave you a little bit more time than I would ordinarily because you've been on hold for so long. I've got a couple of phone lines for you. I'm keen to continue this conversation, although I have a feeling that we're going to be having it for the years to come. The angle that I'm struck by with regard to the Queen's speech is if you voted for the Conservative Party and now you've heard that speech, how do you feel? 0345 606 0973. What did you vote for? Grammar schools, I've always liked the idea of grammar schools. I've got to be honest with you. I've always liked the idea of academic selection, but it's a sort of rare, for me at least, it's a rare incidence of me thinking that policies should be cast according to what suits me. It's selfish politics, if you like, which I ordinarily try to resist. But with grammar schools, I understand the statistical evidence that they're disastrous for generations and for young people. But I still can't shake the idea. It's because I was adopted. I worked this out the other day. So I have this sort of parallel life running in my head where I would be in the world if my biological mother was a teenage Irish girl who came over here to have me and then went back to Ireland. And I was adopted by wonderful, wonderful people and given the best education that money can buy. So I'm always conscious of where my life might have gone if I hadn't been that lucky in the early weeks of my life. I'm always conscious of that. So I often think in terms of, well, what would I have done? I think I'm quite bright. I think I'm quite clever. Would that have been noticed by anybody? Would it have got me anywhere if I'd been to a school where I was more worried about getting beaten up than I was about getting taught, or I was doing the beating up? It could have fallen in any way, shape or form. And because of that, I think I've always had this sense that if you're really good at football, someone's going to notice you and put you in a football club. If you're really good at English, and you're in a humble background, you're from a poor background, then who spots you? That's why I've always liked grammar schools. But I would have wanted it to be proved that they were only going to benefit people from poor backgrounds, not children like my children, who we could send them to private school, or we could move house to send them to grammar school. That seemed to me to be pointless. It's not helping people who need help. But that's off the list. Fox hunting's off the list. Did you vote for the Conservatives because you couldn't wait to get out there again? Tally ho, tally ho. 0345 606 0973. It's just weird. Did you vote for the cap on fuel tax? That's not there. Did you vote for Donald Trump to come and sort of make his way up the Mall in a golden carriage? Holy moly, because that's not going to happen either. Largely, I think, because he wants a safe space to visit. He doesn't want to come to anywhere where he doesn't get to control exactly how everybody behaves. So it's strange times that we're living in. Strange times. What do you make of them? Give me a call. We've got 45 minutes left. We'll do a little bit more on why people are leaving. There was nothing in that speech either about an immigration cap either, which I don't think we should read too much into. So there's some chatter on Twitter about that. I suspect that Brexit legislation will address that kind of issue. It doesn't have to be separately included. But in terms of the power that Theresa May wields, I'm not old enough to remember what it was like in 1978 for Jim Callaghan. I can't quite understand what's going to happen over the next couple of years. She is utterly without authority. I mean, completely without authority. That's not a criticism. That's a statement of political and historical fact. She's essentially enslaved to 5 or 6 people joining forces from her own benches and scuppering any legislation that she wants to bring through at all, which is, I think, why all of the legislation suggested today was either fairly meaningless or utterly uncontroversial, apart from the fact that all the laws that we are subject to because of the European Communities Act, an act of the British Parliament, by the way, but an act of the British Parliament that will cease to apply to Britain when we leave the European communities. So we just need to now repackage all those laws, which are currently British laws, passed in association with our European partners, and now we're going to pass them in no association with our European partners. So the laws aren't going to change. You hope, because the only way that they're likely to change, when you consider who is leading us into this period of British history, are the laws that protect us. A bonfire of regulations, they said. A bonfire of regulations, because regulations and bonfires, well, you do the maths. Just a little bit of housework for you. I've just heard from the Westway Sports Centre down in North Kensington, very near Grenfell Tower, and one of the centres of the relief efforts and the help efforts. And you'll remember last week we had to put out an urgent message to stop turning up. Those are the things that give us hope, aren't they? We had to send out a message, I hope you're listening, to say please stop donating goods and food and clothes and sundry other items to the relief effort, because they are literally inundated. Carlu rang in from my neck of the woods, Chiswick, where he runs a van hire company, offering to do it for free if anyone in Chiswick wants to drop stuff up at his place. He was going to drive it. He got in touch the next morning and said, I just can't, no one's taking anything anymore. Please tell them to stop. Tell people, the lovely, kind, generous people, to stop bringing stuff. Well, I've just heard from the Westway Sports Centre, and they have a desperate need, a dire need of toiletries. Which is, if you need any help understanding what that means, usually food banks send similar messages. Sanitary products for women in particular are at a premium. And then obviously the rest of the sort of contents of the bathroom cabinet as well, toilet roll, toothpaste, toothbrushes, all that sort of thing. Because remember that although there is money making its way to these families, it's a bureaucratic process. And everything they own has been burnt to a cinder. Everything, even their toothbrush, you know? And of course, Britain in 2017 being what it is, the fact that a lot of these people are from elsewhere, a lot of them will have questionable immigration status, some of them will probably be here illegally. That will be used as an attempt to explain to you why we shouldn't help them or care for them or care about them. It's a choice that we have, all of us, whether or not we care for our fellow human beings. That's all. And the more you encourage the caring for our fellow human beings, the more likely you are to benefit from it. Seems to me to be the most simple of messages, and yet the hardest to convey to some corners of the country at the moment. Why are you such a leftist is a word that just means anti-racist now, right? So notice this popping up in the rhetoric. He's a leftist, she's a leftist. That just means anti-racist, right? Or just not racist, actually. So you try and get this message out that you the best way you can make sure that people treat you with decency and compassion and kindness is to encourage everybody to treat everybody with decency and compassion and kindness. But we began the show this morning by marking the epic effort that's been put into getting us to treat people differently according to what they are. You know, 2 people drive a van into a crowd of innocents. We should have different reactions to them because one's a Muslim and one isn't, or one's a white supremacist and one isn't, or whatever it may prove to be. No, you judge people by the actions that they do. It's the most fundamental tenet of the Christian faith, actually. You judge people by what they do, by their actions. So if we all try to be a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more compassionate and a little bit more kind, then there grows daily the chance of us being on the receiving end of compassion and kindness and open-mindedness when we find ourselves needing it. And the people who are sort of trying to create in your mind the idea that you'll never need it, yeah, sure. Like you'll never need the health service. Like you'll never need the welfare state, like you'll never need unemployment benefit or an old age pension, like you'll never need nurses or doctors, like you'll never need nursery nurses or teachers. You'll never need any of these people. Steve's in West Malling. Steve, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Fred Fan Caller. I've been listening to your show for a long time.
Good man.
I'd like to pose the opposite. You know, we've had a lot of EU citizens ringing up this morning worried about living here. I'm actually an Englishman that's leaving to live in Bulgaria because I can't stay here anymore.
Why not?
I'm absolutely... Because, I've worked in European social funding for 17 years. I've seen the good that Europe's done. I've always considered myself a European citizen before I'm a UK citizen. And after Brexit, it just broke me. And also, I'm going to be starting a business out there as well, so I'm going to be an employer. But I just can't stay here any longer. My best friend is Bulgarian. I have another friend who's Italian. I have another friend who's Lithuanian. I'm a magician of the Magic Circle. We're moving over there to open a bar and do magic. And
what, a magic bar?
Yeah, magic cabaret bar. I have managed a cabaret bar on the Thames.
That is a brilliant idea. So I come and buy a drink and you make it disappear? Because I usually do that myself. You can have that, Steve. You can have that for nothing, mate.
But, rather than stay here and be downtrodden and trapped by Brexiteers, I'm willing to
You don't have to be. London's expensive and it's going to get more expensive, so you'd be better off, I suppose, doing that. What about freedom of movement, though? Aren't you worried that you might get...
Well, I'm taking the chance that, because if I move to Bulgaria, I can get a 5-year residency certificate as an EU citizen. In the meantime...
you mean they control their borders?
Yeah, well, you get a residency certificate like anybody else if you're an EU citizen instantly for 5 years. Now, I'm hoping that once I'm bedded in there with my business partners in Bulgarian, that they will just, accept me. If not, I'll try another way, but I'm determined not to come back. Because
we'll miss you. We'll miss you, mate. Have you ever bumped into Steve? Have you ever bumped into Steve Allen at Magic Circle events?
Well, he's a very big supporter of the Magic Circle and that. And I know Jack Galvin, who's been on his show quite a few times in the past.
But you're off. Well, I wish you well. I wish you weren't going, in a way, but then again, I like freedom of movement, so the fact that you can go to Bulgaria and open a business and take your taxes with you and hire staff and jobs and do it over there, it's great, because that's what freedom is. But unfortunately, future generations are not going to be able to enjoy that. I hope you're all right. 25 minutes after 12 is the time, and thanks for sticking on the line for so long. Mark's in Plymouth. Mark, what made you pick up the phone? Have you forgotten?
No, I haven't. No.
Take your time, my friend. Take your time.
Putting my cider down. I've been listening to your show for the last month, and I'm really hooked on it, and really enjoy the way you deal with the directly with some of the callers that come in that are totally off this planet, for want of a better word. I'm a night shift manager, and for a multi-billion-pound company, obviously we can mention names. It's an American company, and I have about 60 souls that I'm in charge of, and 50% are from other countries and cultures, from Somalia, Eastern European, Indian, Filipino, so on and so on. We've got a great harmony on our shift, and the reason why I'm calling is because you hear so much doom and gloom about racist and terrorism and whatever and that. It's more in a positive light, because we work really well together. We have open discussions on the shop floor.
This is my normal. That's what that is what should be the normal narrative that's out there. But we've spent years being told that they're nicking our jobs and nicking our benefits, nicking our women, nicking this, that, and the other. But the reality I recognise is the one that you describe: people working alongside each other in harmony and happiness. But the vote for Brexit means that their future has been thrown into doubt, thrown into potential disarray.
And when that vote came about, there was a lot of unsettlement and people talking. But it's incredible, really, because there's 6 shifts that work in this particular company that I work for.
Yeah.
And my shift is the most productive, funny enough. Because,
really?
It's incredible. And the people work really well together. And without hopping on and taking up your time,
you take as much time.
The message I want to say basically is that we can live and work together and work in harmony, and be able to speak freely and open. I was lucky because my father was in the forces, so I've had the privilege of living and working in different countries and cultures. I think a lot of these issues that are coming about, and they're bred from ignorance.
That's the charitable analysis, and I think it holds true right across the board. Ignorance in the gentlest sense of the word. People just don't know stuff. They don't know the truth, and that's why so much of the greatest anger, the most powerful, the most passionate people on the opposite side of the argument that you're describing are the ones that have never worked in a workforce like yours, that have never lived abroad like you've lived abroad, or at least have never actually recognised. Again, now back to that Joe Cox line about recognising what we have in common instead of what makes us different.
I mean, you're spot on, James. I mean, it's not about colour, creed, religion, origin. It's about human beings, regardless of where they come from. Because you get bad people in all religions and all cultures, but there's people with good hearts in all of those categories that I just stated. And if you can work together and live together, and like I said, we are a little bit sheltered down here in the south, I must admit. But
I don't know that you are, actually. I think, given you describing the backgrounds of your own colleagues, your own workforce, you've got an absolute dinner plate of diversity going on down there. It's the areas where there isn't any that you can routinely find the people who are the most fearful and the most angry about the modern world that you describe, and the modern world that, in many ways, we've voted to abandon. Mark, if you're on the night shift, shouldn't you be in bed?
It's my block off.
All right.
I've got 3 days off. I do 3 on, 3 off. So
enjoy the sunshine.
I'm resting now. Yeah.
Good man. Good man. Go on.
Briefly, I just had to say this because we don't have to fight and beat each other up. Respect each other. My company's core values are treat each other with respect, do not make each other uncomfortable, and work together.
Good God. Have we ended up in a place? I've got to go to the news. I'm late, but I'm going to remember those values. Do not make each other uncomfortable. Crikey. Imagine if that applied to Fleet Street. Is anyone phoning me about the Queen's speech? Has anybody talked about what you'd feel if you'd voted Conservative? If you voted Labour, you're probably just as confused about what's going to happen, especially as many people who voted Labour did so believing that they might constitute some sort of break on Brexit. That's a matter of recorded fact. So I think my favourite line of the whole post-truth era is the idea that 85% of people in the general election voted for parties that definitely want hard Brexit. I mean, I know we've seen an awful lot of conjuring and an awful lot of crud in recent months, but that's probably my favourite. This idea that everybody who voted for the Labour Party is voting for a hard Brexit. Awful lot of Remainers in the Conservative Party, including more than half of the Parliamentary Party, but it's still going to take a little bit longer for reality to kick in completely. But if that Queen's speech spoke to you in any way, shape or form, I'd love to hear from you on 0345 6060973. I'm kind of looking for a clever overview of the political landscape in a way, because very few of us will have personal memories and knowledge of 1978 to a meaningful degree. Minority government with a Queen's speech that had nothing in it. I mean, who are they going to wheel out to cheerlead that? It's probably a rhetorical question. It'd be Ian Duncan Smith. 12:35 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And that Queen's speech was delivered by Her Majesty, accompanied by her son, Prince Charles, because Prince Philip was taken to hospital, a hospital outside which Vincent McAviney is lurking and no doubt sweltering. What do we know, Vincent?
Well, the 96-year-old Duke of Edinburgh was admitted to this hospital here in Marylebone as a precautionary measure for treatment of an infection arising from a pre-existing condition last night. As you mentioned there, Prince Philip, 96 years old, was meant to accompany the Queen to the state opening of Parliament earlier on, Prince Charles going in her place. Buckingham Palace have said that the Prince is in good spirits. He's disappointed to miss that state opening and Royal Ascot as well. I think we know which of those he'll be more missing out on today. The Queen will continue on to Royal Ascot without him, but is being kept abreast of his condition.
And no sort of major cause for concern then, but not nice for Her Majesty to have to undertake that trip. That's like, she's an old lady now, but on her own, effectively, albeit that Prince Charles was there. She likes having him with her. That's what I'm saying, Vincent.
That's right. The palace is downplaying this, saying that, he's in good health and that he should recover from this. But obviously the Queen making that journey on her own and going off to Ascot on her own. We know from when Prince Philip was ill during the Diamond Jubilee in 2012, when he got a bladder infection after that river pageant, she spoke publicly about how much of a great companion he had been at the gala concert that night and how much she missed him. And we know his standing down from public engagements later on in this year in the autumn, something she fully supports, and it seems that she will have to get used to going to things like this, sadly, on her own from now on.
Vincent McAvenny, you've got sun cream, I know, because you tweeted me a photograph. I do care about you as well. I know I don't often give you as much love and attention as I do Theo Usherwood, but, it doesn't mean that I've got favourites.
Oh, thanks, James. Half Irish, half Scottish, so I've got to lather that stuff on for the rest of the afternoon.
You and me both, my friend. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need if you want to talk to me about uncontrolled mass emigration, people quitting these shores, leaving these islands for reasons that I'm keen to establish. And also, I'm just trying to work out what question I'm asking you. If you've already worked out what question I'm asking you before I have, then do feel free to ring in and answer it. Something sort of fundamentally unsatisfying about that speech. Inevitably so, given the nature of the mathematics in the House of Commons. But all of the things that they... if you voted for them, and every single thing that you thought, apart from Brexit, of course, which is even more complicated because the whole deal was that if enough people voted for her, then she'd have a stronger mandate for Brexit. But her majority went off a cliff, which means she's got a much weaker mandate for Brexit. If you take it according to her own analysis of the situation, whatever you voted for is gone. I just want to know how you feel. I don't want to have a squabble with anyone. I don't know quite. They're making a right old mess of politics, aren't they? We can't even have a conversation about the Queen's speech properly because there's nothing in it. How do you feel about the fact there's nothing in it? Is that the question that I'm sort of clumsily trying to frame at the moment? How do you feel about the fact that whatever the reason you had for voting for the Conservative Party was, except for Brexit, which has been weakened by this result, according to her own analysis, not necessarily according to mine, but it's gone. So if you voted for fox hunting, and plenty of people might have done, boom, gone. If you voted because you love the idea of abolishing free school meals for children, boom, gone. If you voted because you quite like the dementia tax, quite, I thought, ostensibly quite a left-wing policy, which the Labour Party were keen to pledge they wouldn't bring in. But the idea that your ability to pay should be taken into account when you're receiving treatment, it's bogus because it differentiates between dementia and cancer. So you get cancer, you get free treatment, you get dementia, you have to pay for it. That's the problem that they're going to have to face at some point, but they've put that off. The cap on fuel bills is gone. I don't really understand why. The Donald Trump visit, maybe you were really looking forward to that because you're really, really weird. That's gone. It's all gone. Everything's gone. What did you vote for? How do you feel that whatever it was you voted for has gone? Unless it was Brexit that you voted for because you thought she was going to be stronger and she's being made weaker. Oh, boy. Giorgio's in Kingston. Giorgio, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. I was hoping to be able to offer a slightly different perspective.
Good.
So I'm Italian, as you might have realized by my accent. I left Italy about 16 years ago. So I've been living in Austria, in the United States. I've been in London for 7 years now. My first son was born in America. The second son was born in London. So I think I can call myself a citizen of the world.
No such thing, remember? Theresa May said that the day she got elected. There's no such thing as a citizen of the world. But anyway, she's changed her mind about everything else, Giorgio, so I've got a feeling you'll be all right.
Exactly. So technically I don't exist, according to Theresa May. But what I wanted to say is that personally, I even after Brexit, of course, I never felt discriminated. And the reason is because I live in a bubble inside a bubble. Oh. Okay, so I live in London, which is very, as you know very well, is a very particular corner of the country. Yes. And I'm also a scientist. I'm an academic. So I'm surrounded by people who passionately hate Brexit. Okay, I don't think I know anyone who would ever consider voting for Brexit. So I live in a very tight bubble, and that's actually why I listen to LBC, because I want to see how the outside world looks like.
Yes.
But having said this, even though I never felt discriminated, obviously I had to face the consequences and make plans for the future, about many other people in my situation. But I didn't even file for documents, even though I have the right to stay. At this point, I can even get the citizenship. Because I simply don't believe that anything is going to happen. I don't think the Brexit is going to go through. There is no way whatsoever that this country can afford to leave the single market. It will be, such an economic disaster.
You're a scientist, so you know that they're not. Causation and correlation are not the same thing. Britain can't afford to leave the single market. You're absolutely right. But that doesn't mean Brexit won't happen.
No, but Brexit will happen in the way that we will leave the EU, and actually I think this is a good thing.
But no, you don't. You come here to put your head outside the bubble. You know that now people are screaming at their radio saying, "We want our country back."
No, but you see that even after the general election, the things have changed. I mean, if you look at the numbers, things are changing, and people will slowly realize what is going to happen. And that is why, it's been a year.
But then they're going to have to admit they were wrong, which is that's the hardest thing for a human being to do.
They were wrong, yes. And this was something that the Tories was never in the position to deliver from the very start. So Theresa May is not famous for being someone who is really pro-immigration. When she was at the Home Office, she really did some nasty thing in terms of, well, I shouldn't use this word, but she did she had some
divisive ideas that did absolutely nothing to address the problem, but did feed the people screaming about the problem, the perceived problem.
So the spousal visa, for instance, all these things that she did at Home Office, she's clearly not a very pro-immigrant politician. Yet she campaigned for Remain. She campaigned for Remain because she knew that it was just economic. Exactly. She was very aware of the economics of it. And she found now in this position where she cannot deliver. And I believe, I'm not the only one, but I believe that's one of the reasons why she chose people like David Davis and Boris to partner with her, because they also are not, David Davis until a few months ago was thinking that the UK could strike a unilateral deal with Germany or France.
I know.
Yeah, it's just plain ridiculous. Even, seen by the eyes of an Italian, it's just plain ridiculous. And so there's no way they're going to deliver anything which is outside of a Norway-like deal. So this is how we're going to end up.
And Norway has freedom of movement. It just has no say over the regulations that it's bound by law to follow.
Yeah, it will be a total political defeat for the UK. Politically, it will be a disaster for the UK. I think on the long term, it will be good for the EU. on the long term, it will be good for the EU because the UK never belonged. Let's be honest about it. If you look at,
I never really bought that. I mean, I know. Actually, you're right. We spent 30 years fetishizing lies about bananas, didn't we? And bendiness and this idea. If only the House of Lords played a part in this. I think Theo was explaining his theory to me yesterday that because our second chamber is the House of Lords. And there are some decent politicians, some decent British politicians in the European Parliament, but we've never really sent the cream of the crop. The idea that are fully qualified. If you ended up with a peerage, Giorgio, after a glittering career in science, in academia, then you'd go to the House of Lords, whereas other countries send... It was when Farage made that speech about all of them being worthless, and he was sitting next to a brain surgeon and a rocket scientist, and that wonderful picture where it pointed out that other countries send some incredibly powerful intellects and some incredibly experienced experts to the European Parliament, and we don't.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's also the social feelings and the fact that most people don't really know what the EU is about.
But they're learning now. It's just too late.
Yeah, it's too late.
I knew nothing. I knew nothing about 90% of the stuff I've learned since. You're at me. What sort of science do you do?
I'm a neuroscientist. I study sleep.
So you're a brain surgeon?
Kind of, yes.
Well, this country's had enough of experts, Giorgio. Although we could certainly do with a few more brains. Mind how you go, my friend. I know you're not a brain surgeon. That's the area, isn't it? Neuroscience of studying. 12:45 is the time. Does he have security? Have we sent any security with him? Because I've been listening to the radio today and reading the papers, and I'm very worried about our special correspondent Richard Souchet. He's gone to the Day of Rage. He's there now on Shepherd's Bush Green, and so as I cross live, we probably won't be able to hear him because of all the screaming lefties in the background. Richard, are you all right?
I'm incognito, James. Don't worry, I'm fine.
Undercover.
Nobody knows I work for LBC.
Okay, and how many thousands of people are there?
Not 70 to 80,000, just 70 to 80 people at the moment. But
are they supposed to start walking in 10 minutes?
That's true. But let me say that on the protest on Friday, there was one person at the protest at the time it was due to start, and it ended up being really quite large. So let's not read too much into it just yet.
So they're going to gather in numbers as they make their way through town.
Yeah, and maybe when people finish work, other people will join, and there are 2 other protests going on in London today. And if they join up, then the size may grow. But you're right, it's very quiet at the moment. And considering Day of Rage was trending on Twitter this morning, it hasn't at the moment come to fruition in terms of the numbers of people we have here.
Is there any rage though? You can find a bit of rage, can't you?
Well, we've been discussing rage in the last few minutes here in Shepherd's Bush, and a representative from Grenfell has taken to the microphone and begged the people here, not to allow this to turn violent. He used the words, "I beg you, do not ignore us. I'm asking you to walk, if anything, walk silently through the streets. Don't even chant. It will be more powerful that way." They are desperate not to have their cause hijacked by any kind of violence. Well, a little bit earlier I spoke to Antonia Bright, who's from the Movement for Justice, who are organising this particular march, and I asked her why she called it Day of Rage and whether she was concerned that things might descend.
Rage is the word. I don't know what's a better word. You tell me what you felt when you woke up and saw what was happening at Grenfell.
Okay, but I'm trying to...
I mean, as you see the unfolding of the, flammable cladding put on a building, for the sake of it looking good to the neighbours. So tell me what you felt, because if it's not, I don't understand if it's not rage. Rage is a passionate anger. It's being furious that something should never have taken place.
Yes, the question is how that rage manifests itself. So what I'm asking you is how you will feel if, despite all the pleas for it to remain peaceful, it does descend.
But I'm turning it back because it is still a stereotype. I think that the question is really an assumption that if it's about the Black and Asian or migrant communities, then it only means, violence. There's a stereotype in that.
Well, no, I mean, everybody here is.
We're not assuming that that's how it turns out at all. But so you're saying you're critical of Day of Rage, and if it said rage, then
I'm asking how you that there are concerns that things might turn violent. How will you personally feel if that happens? I mean, we
don't anticipate, and we don't think that it would.
What is your message to people today?
Our message to people
in terms of how they protest.
Yeah, our message to people today is to stick together, to have loud voices, to make it clear to this government that we don't accept them to continue to be in charge over our lives, over the decisions that affect our lives anywhere. And that we are going to get to Parliament, that's our goal, and that we're going to make a speak out at Parliament.
What's troubling me is that...
Is that clear enough?
Well, yes, but what's troubling me is that the people who are involved in Grenfell residents have been very clear that they do not want violence today. They do not want a distraction. They don't want their cause to be cast in that kind of light. And you are not echoing that plea. You are not saying to me right now, please, everybody, remain peaceful. Don't damage buildings, don't attack the police. You're not saying that.
No, we are. Okay, we are echoing, and I understand, none of the communities, none want violence, but we don't want lives of violence. We want lives of peace, but we don't have justice. And peace and justice are hand in hand, so we need justice. We need justice.
Well, Antonia Bright is on the microphone right now, asking people to be angry and make their voices heard when the march begins at 1 o'clock. That is rather in contrast, as I said a little bit earlier, to the representative from Grenfell here, who asked people to do the opposite and be extremely quiet, extremely calm. We'll have to see how it pans out. As I say, it's not a huge crowd at the moment. It may grow.
Thousands was the prediction. Do you think it could reach that sort of figure, or is that? It's not really a fair question, is it?
This was Well, I mean, look, it's been organised in a Facebook group, and I think something in the region of 400 people have registered their interest. Previous experience tells me that generally you get below that number. But, you know, depending on how these things play out, the timing of it, you know, what is said and what is picked up elsewhere, it can change, but I'd be surprised if it's thousands.
Well, I'm now less concerned for your safety than I was when we crossed live to what I thought was tens of thousands of people raging on Shepherd's Bush Green. But I will ask you what I've asked your two colleagues from the newsroom. Have you got sun cream with you?
Do you know what? I have not worn sun cream all week, but today I have caved and I have finally done it.
Thank you, Lord.
So, yeah. Actually, well, that's an interesting point, actually, about the weather. It is extremely hot today. It'd be interesting to see how that does affect people. Usually good weather means that people come out, but it is so hot, I wonder if it's going to have the opposite effect.
It can be too good. I certainly wouldn't fancy walking from Shepherd's Bush to Westminster in this heat. Richard Suchet, stay safe. There is room for rage. I want to make that clear. I'm not sure it's been articulated in a vaguely helpful way, but David Lammy, the Labour MP, is increasingly concerned about the possibility of cover-up. And I would just say one word to you if you are in any way sceptical or cynical about the likelihood of a cover-up being undertaken, even at some of the very highest echelons of our society, and that word you probably know will be Hillsborough. So what David is reporting is a couple of things on that front, but also on this notion of intentional homelessness. So that if a Grenfell family looking to be rehomed, for example, say, I really don't want to move to Preston, I don't know anybody there, I don't even know where Preston is, the council could describe them as being intentionally homeless, and this would discharge their statutory duty to house the family. Now, Lammy's had verbal assurances from the government that this won't happen, but he is now looking for written assurances. There's no word yet on the statutory duty. He's seeking confirmation from the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea that they will not declare families intentionally homeless if they turn down accommodation. But again, don't forget what I said to you half an hour ago. When they start bringing in the ethnicity, the immigration status, perhaps some illegal subletting, there will be an attempt to make you not care about these people whose lives have been destroyed and whose family members have been killed in the most unspeakable of circumstances. We all have a choice. We either go along with that and say, no, I don't care about them, they shouldn't have been here anyway, or they shouldn't have been in that flat, they're dead. And the ones that have survived, we choose how much we care. And once again, the whole point about universality, the whole point about equality, the whole point about resisting the othering of individuals is that if you ever need help, then the more widespread the feeling is that help and kindness are good things, the more likely you are to receive it when it's your turn to be in bother. Last word on this uncontrolled mass emigration to Gorprit, also in Southall. I give you about 90 seconds, Gorprit. Make it sing.
Sure, Brian. Basically, I'm a student in a medical university, and one of the things that's basically been such a large concern of is the fact that many staff members and stuff in university and research are coming from these Eastern European countries, and there's a big concern in and even funding. I mean, for example, the UK government has basically cut down the funding for DEFRA, which is basically in charge of research and in charge of all these infectious disease controls. And there's been if you look at the UK in terms of beneficiaries, we get a large funding for research, for scientific research and stuff from the EU. So there's a big concern in the future prospect of research in the UK. You know, is it going to be replicated? You know, or is there going to be austerity in terms of even cut to the funding for research
and also individuals as well? I mean, research. I was at Cambridge for the Science Festival a couple of months ago, and people there were telling me, academics, they were telling me, people are already leaving. People are already applying for research positions in European Union countries. The only silver lining was that clever people in America are so terrified by Trump that there's a chance that you'll be able to replace the European Union academics with American academics who are running away from America.
Right, I see.
Happy days.
A lot of my staff colleagues and stuff, because this year I was in research, are basically applying to leave because they're so concerned that basically their research projects would just dry up. There'd be no funding. So it's a very, very large concern in the research industry as to what Brexit is going to do to us.
And we could loosely describe them as the cleverest people, or among the cleverest people in the country who are leaving.
It's quite interesting when you said the whole thing about the fact that other countries from the EU send very, very, delegates from those industries, and we don't seem to do that. I mean, I wasn't aware of that. That's
no, I hadn't thought of it either until relatively recently. Actually, the simple observation that we send I'm sure there are some. I know there are some quality individuals on the British benches in the European Parliament, but my goodness me, there's some flotsam and jetsam as well. Gorpreet, thank you. You filled your boots in style.